Oh, hey, it appears as though you're looking for something. Could it possibly be part 2 of the Wines of Portugal show? Well, guess what? You're in luck. It's right over here. Hi there, everybody. My name's Mike LaPlante, and I'm the average wine enthusiast. Here we are, part 2 of the Wines of Portugal show, otherwise known as Average Wine Enthusiast and His Wife Goes to Portugal recap. On our last show, and if you haven't seen our last show, don't watch this show now. Go back, look for part 1, and watch the first part of the Wines of Portugal show. But if you did watch it, you know that we left off in Porto. So from Porto, we headed north. Our destination after we stayed in Porto was to stay on the Portugal-Spain border in a little town called Melgaço. And it's very nice there. However, on our way there, we stopped at a winery called Afros Wine. Now, before I go any further, I have to preface this by saying when you leave Porto, almost immediately you are going into a different wine region. That wine region is known as Vinho Verde. Green wine is what the direct translation is. Is the wine green? There is some wines that are produced up there that have a touch of a green hue to it. There's some wine that it's very translucent, and I think you can tell more of a green sort of tinge in that wine as opposed to your average Alvarino or some other white wine that grows up in the Vinho Verde region. So we stopped at Afros Wine where we got a nice tasting from Karine, who's from France, which was nice because she spoke pretty decent English, and that always helps. And she gave us a nice tour, and we had a beautiful tasting. She showed us their portfolio, which is pretty massive for the amount of for the size of the place. It was bought by someone who was taking it over. Common story, and it looks like they're ready to pile some money into it, but on an incremental basis. Let's make some wine, let's make some money, let's pour that money into the operation on a year-by-year basis. Seems like he really knows what he's doing. He's got a plan, he's got a vision, and the wines are fantastic. A lot of Alvarino, of course, because that's one of the big grapes up there that grow very nicely, as well as Orinto and some other white varietals as well. The red wines aren't as popular up in Vinho Verde, but they do grow some red wines. We didn't come across many. And of course, when you're in Vinho Verde and you're looking for wine, you might as well go with what you know, and try as many of the wines that the Vinho Verde region is known for. So we made it to Melgaço, which is the home of a winery known as Solero, which is basically right on the Portugal-Spain border. Their tasting room overlooks the Minho River and into Spain. Beautiful area to be having a tasting in, that's for sure. And their wines are, again, very, very good. Mostly Alvarino based wines, and they have different versions of them because they're trying new things all the time. They seem to be a very innovative company, trying different storage techniques, different oak treatments, same things that a lot of other wineries out there are doing. That business started by the family, the Solero family. It started in the garage, and the garage is still there, but of course there's other buildings that have now cropped up. But they have the original vineyard there, so that's one classic Alvarino that they market. And then there's other treatments. They have concrete and amphoras for fermenting and storing of wine, stainless steel, different shapes. They're just trying new things all the time. In fact, they brought us into what they call the innovation room. So they're always trying different tests and different techniques and in little small batches and seeing how they can not necessarily improve upon the wine, but just make things go to a place they haven't been yet and discover what can come out of that. Very, very beautiful tasting there. We had a selection of wines, and they gave us a little meat and cheese and honey and tea. It was very nice. Overlooking the Spanish countryside. It was pretty cool. So while we were at the Solero winery, we picked up a bunch of wines, and one of them is this Alvarino that is a 2022 called Terra Mater, and as I recall, it was delicious. It's not available anywhere else other than at the winery. They don't make very many of these bottles, but it's 12.5% alcohol by volume, which a lot of the wines are there up in the Vinho Verde region. So you can enjoy a lot of wine without feeling too crappy afterwards or catching a bigger buzz. So speaking of Spain, I was listening to a podcast by Elizabeth Schneider from the Wine for Normal People podcast, and she did a show on Mencia, and she talked of the Ribera Sacra, which is the Holy River, and it's in northern Spain, but just not too far away from where we were staying in Melgaço. And it seems like it was, she painted a picture in my mind in her podcast of these vineyards that were on extreme slopes and the river was at the bottom, and that just fascinated me. So my wife and I took a drive over to Spain, and about an hour and a half later, after spending some time in the city of Orense in northern Spain there, we took a drive out into the countryside, which involves mountains. Some crazy driving there, that's for sure. And we came across a winery called Alma das Donas. And Roberto Flamini was this guy's name. And you could tell another family run business. The father, Roberto's father, met us out there. And he's like, oh, I don't speak any English. And then Roberto came out and he gave us a little tour of the terrace that overlooks the Minho River and all the vineyards below. It's almost a surreal experience seeing these vineyards on such a crazy slope, and then the beauty of the mountains around you. It was amazing. So we picked up some Spanish wine during our Portuguese trip, and we took those back, and we also stopped at what we thought was a restaurant, which isn't another thing altogether. Restaurants in Portugal and Spain try to find something to eat between the hours of 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock. Not easy. You got to have something in your belly before 3 o'clock. So anyway, we stopped at this place, had some food that was left over from lunch, and in the same building as the restaurant is they specialize in pork products. So there's all kinds of dried pork products, shanks and sausages, and they're behind the counter slicing up the pork. And there's other kitchen and gift ideas there. And on a back wall is some Spanish wine. Crazy, the retail situation there as far as wine goes. And so we picked up some bottles there. And this was at the end of a day where we stopped at some hot springs, went and visited Roberto. And it turns out when we got back to Portugal to our place in Melgaço, we had forgot the wine that we bought at the pork place. So head back to Spain to pick up our wine. And sure enough, it was still there. And I can boast that I've been to Spain twice in the same day. So that was our foray into the Vinho Verde and into the Ribera Sacra region. And then from there, we headed to the Douro Valley, the famous Douro Valley, which we mentioned in the last show, because that's where the wine is made to make that eventually becomes port. They don't make just port-based wines, though. There's also other still wines there. So when you go for a tasting at one of the wineries there in the Douro Valley, and there are many, and there a lot of them, of course, are the vineyard and winery that's associated with the port lodge that's in Porto. So the same names you'll see on the banks of the Douro River as you would see on the banks of the Douro River, but in Gaia. We went for a tasting at Quinta da Bonfim, and there we had a beautiful tasting overlooking the vineyards and the Douro River, and we tried some red still wines, and they were very nice. The guy who was serving us, I kind of told him who I was and what my purpose there was, and I was wearing my Ontario Wine Society shirt. Trying to appear to be a real wine geek, the wine geek that I am. And he poured us a couple glasses of wine that would not have been opened, but somebody canceled, and so the wine was already opened, and there was a story to it, and he let us have some of that, which was very nice of him. The grapes that they grow there to make the port and to make their still wines, it's heavily based on Touriga Nacional. This is the grape, the red grape, that grows throughout much of the country, and it's very. It reminds me of being rustic, but at the same time, it's the tannins of these wines seem to be sharp, and the acidity is just perfect. It's like a medium acidity that runs throughout it. Some of the wines can be full-bodied, medium-bodied, depending on what they're blended with. Another grape that they use there is Tinto Rorez, which is another name for Tempranillo, which is a great grape, and they grow tons of it in Spain. Of course, that's the grape that they make Rioja with, just over in the next country there. So that's the wine that we were drinking, was still red wine as opposed to port, because you could get port in the Douro Valley as well. Sort of a dichotomy there. And a bottle that I picked up at the Quinta da Bonfim, which is associated with Symington's, which is a huge port company out of Portugal. I asked the gentleman who gave us our tasting, which I wish I could remember his name. This guy was from Portugal, and he spoke with an English accent. I say it's an English accent. My wife and I were trying to figure out where he was from. Was it Australia or was it from the UK? Turns out he's from Portugal, and he's had a speech teacher since he was 6 years old. I'm assuming he doesn't have it anymore because he speaks perfect English. And but anyway, this was our guy, and I asked him, as we were leaving, and we were in the wine shop to take some stuff away with us, and I said, what would be a good wine for me to buy, something that you would suggest? And he suggested a bottle of Alicante Bouchette, which is a grape varietal that was formulated, I don't know the better word for it, but it came about because Mr. Bouchette did some crazy magic on some grapes and created this grape varietal. But in France, it doesn't grow so good. There's issues with growing it. I'm not sure if it's susceptible to disease or it needs longer than normal growing season, or it needs hotter sun units. I'm not exactly sure, but it grows better in Portugal, or at least the way it's been treated in Portugal is better than the way they make it in France. This is kind of a common reality that is accepted by most wine folks, that the Alicante Bouchette from Portugal is better than the Alicante Bouchette that comes out of France. So since then, I have had Alicante Bouchette twice. I haven't opened the bottle that I got from the Quinta de Bonfim in the Douro Valley, but that's another story altogether. And what was the vintage that he sold me? 2018. So the Doro Valley it's just gorgeous there. Again, there's mountains with beautiful vineyards going down them with olive trees in between and some natural brush as well. And it is and it's been around forever. And it's such a unique part of Portugal that it's a UNESCO site. So they can't change too much about the Douro Valley and the growing that goes on there. They have to grow a certain amount of certain grapes, and they can't grow more, and they can't grow less, or can't attempt to grow less, for whatever reason you would do that, which is common to do that in many vineyards. You pull vines and you plant more vines where you've created space, but they can't do that there because it is a UNESCO protected site. Kind of interesting and somewhat handcuffing to the folks who are growing the grapes there. So from the Douro Valley, we traveled south to the Dão region, which is pretty much right in the middle of the country. And the Dão region is more, it isn't very populated there. It's pretty purely agriculture-based area, lots of little villages in not so mountainous areas. Definitely not flat there. And we stopped at Julia Kemper, which I've had the opportunity to drink some Julia Kemper before I went to Portugal, and it is delicious red wine. So, and I'm a big red wine fan, and I wanted to make sure I tried some wines from the Dão, because the Dão is a relatively small wine region in Portugal, so not a lot of wine comes out of there. I know the Julia Kemper is available in the United States. I've yet to see any here at the LCBO, but if you see some yourself, I would highly recommend you pick up a bottle of it. It's probably not that expensive. Having said that, we had a tasting there, and she built up this one wine, like this was their flagship red wine, and it was a 2011, and she poured some of this for us, and we felt like we were privileged to be able to be drinking such an old vintage, and she said they had some of this available for us to buy, and so we're thinking, okay, this is going to be whatever, 30, maybe even 40 euros to buy a bottle of this. It could be even more expensive for all I know. And 17.95 euros. Crazy. So needless to say, we picked up a bottle of that and another bottle of Julia Kemper and brought them back to Ontario with us. So the Dão is very well known for its red wines. And Julia Kemper is an interesting story too. Another family-owned farm. It had been in the family for 300 years. Julia's dad said he wanted to take the farm and grow grapes there and start, making more wine, because they did grow wine, and it was just like many families there. They grow grapes, and there's like a network, a family network, family and friends, and if you belong to that network, you're going to get some of this wine. But he wanted to make it bigger. He wanted to start a business. He wanted this to be his family legacy. I think she had 3 siblings, but he picked her, and she had a very successful law practice. And he said, I want you to stop doing that. I want you to start this business. She said okay, and dropped the law and picked up the wine, and the rest is history. Very interesting story, which, there's, in the wine industry, there's so many interesting stories as far as how people got into the business and why they're still there. So after we left the Dão region, we headed down to Évora, which is the center, I should say, of the Alentejo wine region, which it too is well known for the red wines that come out of there. Delicious wines from a relatively large wine region. It stretches almost the whole width of the country, and it's not a very wide country. I want to say it's about 100 miles wide in some places, maybe 150 in others. And Evora is kind of like right in the middle there. A beautiful city, lots to offer. And we visited a couple wineries there. But the best place that I went to, though, was it's like a central repository for all the wines in the Alentejo wine region, which they have these in France. You go to every village that is the center of a subregion, and they have all the wines that are available in that subregion are available at what they call them tourist centers. And they do everything there. They'll tell you how to rent a bike, and they'll tell you where the nearest gift shop is, but they'll also sell you wine from the people who are growing grapes and making wine there. So there's one of these places in Evora that had I don't know if it's every winery in the Alentejo region, but there was a lot. And the room was mind-boggling, really. And I kind of just went out from our place in Evora just to go pick up a bottle of wine or two, and before we were going to leave to go down to the Algarve, and I just basically stumbled upon this place, and I geeked out with the guy in there for quite a while, and he let me taste a whole bunch of really good wines, turned me on to some stuff that I didn't know, got a little education of my own while I was down there. So I'm going to take a little break here and have a little swig of what I'm drinking now, which is some Divergence Viognier, the 2021 vintage. Viognier is a grape varietal that I'm getting turned on to more and more, and I'm digging it. It's a beautiful food pairing wine. This one here has hints of lemon, stone fruit, gooseberries. Not crazy acidic. Has a slight salinity to it, a little salty, and I'm not exactly sure what the residual sugar in here is, but it's not super duper dry, but it's not sweet at all. But it's very nice, especially on a hot summer day, or if you're having some seafood. Divergence. I think you have to go to the winery to get this. There was 95 cases of this produced. Very small lot, which if you can find small lot wines, go for it. Divergence. So where was I? Oh, that's right. I was in Evora. So from Evora, we went to the Algarve. And the Algarve isn't really known for their wine, and we didn't visit any wineries there, but we did visit a bunch of beach towns. It's very nice down there. They have the limestone carvings, when I say carvings, that the water carves out the limestone and creates these crazy formations on the ocean. Beautiful area, for sure. Then from the Algarve, we had to head up back to Lisbon, but on our way there, we stopped at the oldest cork tree, which you got from the opening of part 1 of the Wines of Portugal show. And that's in a little town, like just a little hamlet of a town, and it's kind of part of a park. If you noticed, kids were playing baseball while we were trying to hang out and document certain aspects of this tree. Fun time there at the oldest cork tree in the world. Lots of cork trees in Portugal, that's for sure. And it's a native tree that's always been there, as far as humans know. And then from there, we went back to the Lisbon area, but we stopped in Setubal, which is a wine region of its own, known for their white wines. And that was actually when we got back to the Lisbon area. We actually stayed just on the other side of the river from Lisbon at a place called Costa Caparica. And from there we went to Setúbal. And when we got to our place in Costa Caparica, the guy who was running our Airbnb had a bottle of some Setúbal wine waiting for us, and it was delicious. So I thought, well, heck, let's go try to hunt down a winery where we can get some more of this stuff, because it was very good, and that's what we did. So we stopped at a family-run place called Fonseca Jose and Maria Fonseca, and we had a nice little tasting there with John, and they had an interesting tasting room. They had bottles like in a carousel, probably as big as this table, and there was different wines in it, and the price of each tasting was in LED at the top. So, but it wasn't self-serve, but you knew that as you went around, they got more expensive. And John was a great taste hosting person for us, and he gave us a nice tasting there, and we ended up picking up a few bottles of the Jose and Maria Fonseca from Setubal as well. I guess that's going to do it now. I've been running a little long on the show, probably a lot longer than I wanted to. I wanted to get through it as fast as I possibly could and still impart as much knowledge as I could and give you a good idea of what our trip was like going to Portugal. We'd enjoyed it very much, and I would highly recommend taking a trip there yourself. Things are not that expensive, relatively speaking, depending on your currency exchange rate. Ours right now, the Canadian dollar against the euro, is pretty poor. But relatively speaking, things are somewhat inexpensive there, and you can have a really nice time on not too big of a budget. I guess that's going to do it for now. I'd like to thank you for watching this show, and if you know anybody who is like you, who would be into watching videos like you are about wine, turn them on to the Average Wine Enthusiast. I'd also like to thank the Big Organ Trio for letting me use their music in the show. I guess that's going to do it for now. See you on the next episode. My name is Mike LaPlante, and I'm the Average Wine Enthusiast. Salud!